Surviving is what poverty and dysregulation force you to optimize for. Thriving requires something the system rarely provides. This is not a lecture about other people. It's a presentation by someone who has lived every layer of what we're about to discuss. I am Isha Sarah Snow, and I am the founder and the executive director of NeuroHomes. I have a lot of different hats and a lot of intersecting identities, including being a cancer survivor, autistic, spiritual. Identity is layered, and I'm not just an academic and scholar. All of these different roles went into creating this project. There's an inherent mismatch between my autistic neurology and my physical and mental capabilities and the 40-hour work week and demands of society in our culture. In my early 20s, I tried to go to college on 4 separate occasions and was forced to drop out without completing my education each time because I would push myself to the point of collapse and then would be forced to recover. I was able to finish college recently, but it was at great expense. These deficits are not mine. It's built by the systems themselves. And this deficit in the system directly inspired this project. Potential investors, lenders, and partners might ask themselves why they should trust in the NeuroHomes framework, and I would answer that they should trust it not despite of what I've been through, but specifically because of what I learned surviving it. With a 3.94 GPA, a member of the Washington All-State Phi Beta Kappa academic team, as well as being a Washington Women in Need All-Star Scholar. My certifications in trauma and mental health first aid, in addition to my academic record, are the bridge between my lived experience and this theory. In my early 20s, I'd set out to study psychology. But after I'd returned to school 5 years ago, it felt like there was something missing. When I went back to school, I found out that every discipline, from evolutionary medicine to linguistic anthropology, is all circling the same thing: how humans regulate, connect, and develop. Attachment theory happens on the individual level, which is what happens inside one person as the result of their early relational experience. Secure is the goal, but fearful is the most common outcome of our current system, with a negative model of self, a negative model of other, avoiding intimacy, and deeply anxious. Did you grow up in a home where you were taught you were the problem? Zooming out to the systemic level, we have family communications theory. The key insight here is on the bottom right in the protective style with high conformity and low conversation. This results in conversations like "do what I say" and "don't ask why." This is the dominant communication style in under-resourced families, not because the parents are cruel, but because survival doesn't have time for nuance. Zooming in to the parent-child interaction on the relational level, there is the authoritative quadrant, which is warm structure. That produces regulation, but it requires 2 things poverty often doesn't allow: emotional bandwidth and the knowledge that it's even possible. Authoritarian versus authoritative. They have one letter of difference with vastly different outcomes. The good enough language here is very important because perfection is not the goal, availability is. With availability comes presence, and presence gives us the ability to self-regulate. An informal survey of my 2024 communications class showed that 100% of my fellow students had experienced punitive discipline in childhood, with 60% unable to regulate themselves as adults. That means that 40% had experienced someone who corrected with them and not at them. And this is the entire intervention in a nutshell. The ability to regulate one's emotions shows up in every adult relationship you'll ever have. Half of the people in my interpersonal communications class came from protective family systems. 0 came from pluralistic ones. This is what under-resourced communities look like across the country. These risk factors show the architecture of how family of origin patterns become adult violence. The roots start in insecure attachment, protective communication, and non-authoritative parenting. That creates a person with no tools for intimacy, low emotional intelligence, and high anxiety. And that results in coercive control, violence, and entitlement, or what we call abuse. But this is an environmental phenomenon, not an individual one. The Latin root abutor means to use up, exhaust, or squander. Abuse was never originally about evil, it was about misuse of a resource. The word abuse barely existed in public discourse until the 1970s. Women's and children's rights movements named what had always been happening. When the word covers everything, from a harsh breakup to a decade of coercive control in modern day, it stops meaning anything, and survivors of intimate partner violence pay that price. Generally, what we refer to as abuse in modern-day discourse is actually a nervous system in survival mode, firing responses it learned when it had no other option. The amygdala doesn't know it's today, right now. It just knows it's in danger and associates it with danger it's experienced far earlier. The arrested development point here is key because this is not about a broken person. It's about a person who never got what they needed to develop fully. What they needed was a regulated other to mirror and respond appropriately to their emotions. Because development takes 2. That's neuroscience. And the path forward is completion through mirroring, not punishment. My children arrived to my home 2 years ago following a forced separation with 14 documented cases of abuse and neglect. They were dysregulated and in crisis. But within 90 days, there was a 66% measurable reduction in problematic behaviors. And within a year, we saw a 329% of typical academic growth. The only thing that changed was they had a regulated adult at home who could mirror and co-regulate with them. That was the entire intervention. When it comes to helping survivors, the underlying logic here in each quadrant is the same. The goals are to reduce shame, increase safety, and provide relational contact. Healing is not linear, and withdrawing support because it's taking too long is itself a re-traumatization. Abuse isn't measured by the volume of yelling or the damage to the wall. It's measured by how small the survivor has to become to stay safe. Survivors are forced to shrink to manage someone else's dysregulated nervous system. Systems become dysregulated when they're forced to survive. Scarcity is an active force that pushes caregivers toward protective or authoritarian patterns because that's what survival looks like. That cycle is self-perpetuating, not because of bad values or because of bad character, but because of insufficient resources and incomplete development on every level. The 50% pull statistic is a structural pattern. Nervous system dysregulation and associated behaviors are not character flaws, they're poverty adaptive survival strategies. And calling it that changes everything because it changes how we design housing, services, schools, and communities. Neurohomes is the application of this framework where development can actually complete